Jamaica absolutely exceeded all my expectations. Like, my mind was blown. And you have to understand that I've been traveling a lot. At that point, I'd been to like about 50 countries. When I came to Jamaica, I didn't expect what I saw, because the standard of living is actually really high compared to what I heard. Being from Ukraine, when I came here, it was all totally different from what I expected in a nicer way.
Hello Throppers, and welcome to another video podcast episode. And if this is your first time visiting, a special welcome to you. My name is Winthrop Wellington, and I am the host of On Deck with Throp, where we have meaningful conversations with people from all over the world, all about Jamaica. And today I have a really special guest with us. We're supposed to be doing this for a very long time. Miss Jamaica with Irie, Miss Irina Bruce. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Finally, we've been talking about it for so many months. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if somehow you've been living under a rock and you don't know who Miss Bruce is, among many other things, she is a Jamaican YouTuber and makes incredible, I would say almost documentary style videos on different aspects of living in Jamaica, even going into arts and lifestyle, that sort of thing. And I think, my opinion, what you bring to the Jamaican YouTube market is very different and very unique from what is out there. So outside of that, I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing me. I'm originally from Ukraine. I've been living in Jamaica for almost 9 years. And I chose Jamaica on purpose out of all the countries in the world, because Jamaica is, in my opinion, the best country in the world to live.
I'm not going to argue with you on that one.
Okay, right. See? Excellent. Yeah, so other than that, I never thought I would be doing YouTube, but it just so happened that I began making some videos with a goal to introduce Jamaica to other foreigners. So that was the initial idea behind the channel, because I saw there was so much information about Jamaica in the internet that was incorrect, to say the least. And Jamaica was given this kind of reputation, and a lot of tourists who were coming to Jamaica, they had absolutely different expectations. Some were even afraid of leaving their hotel because they were told, like, no, don't go outside of your hotel because it's, maybe not safe and so on. And it was so much nonsense. Just, it's precisely you need to leave. I don't know what to do in hotels. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's nice, but it's Jamaica, you need to see it. So, and that's how I started, because I was really lazy explaining to tourists all the time, like what they need to do or where they need to go. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to record a couple of videos and just let them travel. Just send the videos to them. So when they're like, oh, Irina, what are the places you would advise to visit? And I'm like, here, watch that. And that's it. And I thought it was going to take me like a month to record everything in Jamaica. And then it turned out that I made a list of all the places to visit that I have visited in Jamaica, and the list came to 1,015 attractions.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was just the attractions. And I was like, oh dear, that might take me half a year. As a result, actually, I've been filming it since 2015, and I launched my YouTube channel in 2020. So it took me 5 years just to document things. And guess what? When I launched my YouTube channel, I didn't actually use much of the footage I filmed because it was all it just went out of date. So a lot of the things I record now are very much about Jamaica as a country, not only for tourists, but also aiming at expats, other Jamaicans, people who want to relocate to Jamaica. Yeah.
No, like I said, I really appreciate your content. And so does my dad. My dad sends me your videos all the time. Like, you gotta check this out. You gotta do stuff like Irina and da 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 da. So he's a big fan of yours. And even though I'm already a subscriber, he just wants to make sure that I see your content. How long have you been living in Jamaica?
well, it's 9 years.
9 years in total.
Right, almost 9 years, yeah. So, and it's mostly in Montego Bay.
In Montego Bay. And when was your first time that you came to Jamaica?
It was in February 2014. I came for 2 weeks with a goal to check if Jamaica was indeed as I thought it was, because I hadn't been to Jamaica before that.
Okay.
And I had already made plans that I would want to come and live here for a year, maybe. Right? So I came for 2 weeks just to have a look, and Jamaica absolutely exceeded all my expectations. Like, it was like my mind was blown. And you have to understand that I'd been traveling a lot. At that point, I'd been to like about 50 countries.
Oh, wow.
And then, so when I came to Jamaica, I didn't expect what I saw. Absolutely not. I was really in a good way. I was impressed in a like, wow, because the standard of living is actually really high compared to what I heard. Do you know, the kind of stereotypes that I heard about Jamaica. And also, I'm from Ukraine. Ukrainian people don't know much about Jamaica, you see. So if I was from the United States, I might have probably had some information because Jamaicans live in the US, you know. But being from Ukraine, when I came here, it was all like totally different from what I expected in a nicer way.
So I find that interesting that you've been to so many countries, over 50 countries, right? And there are people that come to Jamaica that fall in love with Jamaica. And I'm mainly talking about Americans that really haven't been anywhere, and this may have been the third and fourth country that they've been to, and they fall in love with Jamaica. So I always find it interesting when I meet somebody who is a true blue world traveler, has all this experience in different cities, different countries, different cultures, and even with all that and coming from a different hometown, home country, and they're able to say like, this is the best, and they don't want to be anywhere else. And is there something in particular that happened during that 2 week first trip that you experienced that you were like, man, this is it?
Absolutely. I stayed in Ocho Rios. So that was my first town, even though I was planning to relocate to Montego Bay. But because of the way it worked out, I went to Ocho Rios first, and that's where I stayed. And I went to Irie Blue Hole Waterfalls, and then I went to Calby's place. Now, I was extremely lucky with the people I met. So the very first day I arrived in Jamaica, in the hotel I stayed in Ocho Rios, I met some people there who introduced me to other people, just Jamaicans, just locals in Ocho Rios. And they were like, listen, we're planning to go to that place. Would you like to come with us? You know, and it wasn't like a tour or, you know, offered something like they didn't want any, they actually didn't charge me anything. It was, I didn't even pay for fuel because I had a rented car. So I just drove after them, you know, and these people, they took me to Irie Blue Hole at that time. Right now it's a super popular attraction. It just gets like, a lot of tourists go there now. But at that time in 2004, it was, 2014. But at that time, in 2014, it was almost empty. There were no people, and we also went in the evening. And I was absolutely shocked because of three things. One, I never thought Jamaica had mountains and rainforests. It was a total surprise to me because it's always like Jamaica is portrayed like this beach, you know? And beach is like, it's just such a tiny fraction of what Jamaica is, right? So that's first. Second, I never thought that Jamaican people had this kind of vibe. They're very free and they think like very sincere. So this sincerity is just absolutely, like they say what they think. I absolutely loved it. Absolutely. So that's the second. And the third, when I had my younger son with me, when we went to the waterfalls, it was probably the first time when I saw such a happy child. No, I mean, he's been to quite a few places by then. But he was like, his eyes rolled like this. He was like pointing his fingers like this. Oh my God. And these waterfalls, you know, Irie Blue Hole is 12 waterfalls, one after another in rainforest, and you just hike them. Oh, it was a shocker. Like the beauty and the people and the vibes. And I wouldn't say people are chill. Like, you know, there is this stereotype that Jamaicans are always relaxed. No. It's more like they're fun.
Yeah.
They're just fun people to be around. And that was probably the most mind-blowing thing. And of course, as I mentioned, the standard of living is way higher than Jamaicans think. It's just that, you see the problem in Jamaica, they never like compare Jamaica to the rest of the world. They always compare Jamaica to the United States, to Canada, and the United Kingdom. The standard of living, right? They don't compare the standard of living to, I don't know, Malaysia or Ukraine. Well, not now, but in general, right? To, I don't know, Maldives, Fiji, I don't know, Cuba even. They don't really. They just look at Canada and say, oh, you see, Jamaica is no good, you know. But I mean, come on. You know, it's just a completely different lifestyle, different economy. But also, in the last 10 years, Jamaica has made such a huge progress. Oh my goodness, 2014 and 2023, these are two very different Jamaicas. Very different. So, yeah, that's probably... And in 2014, I was already impressed. So there you go.
You said a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
I want to unpack bits and pieces of it. So how old was your son at the time?
It was 2014, so almost 8. He was 7.5 years old.
Okay. So he's a kid.
Yeah, kid. Yeah. I'm not that old.
Right. I wasn't implying that at all.
Of course you weren't.
But I also liked how you hit on the fact that Jamaica is not all beaches. And
oh no.
I think that's completely understated, underrepresented. The hikes, the nature, the waterfalls, the I don't know if you call it rainforest, but forest of some sort. And I think that is really, really understated. And I'm really happy you mentioned that.
The thing that Jamaica also has, right, is that is never ever talked anywhere. It's the caves. There are over 1,000 caves in Jamaica. And these caves are like, they're full of life. There are all sorts of microorganisms in these caves that are extremely important for the ecosystem that we have here. And the plants that we have in the caves, we have plants in the caves, and the bats we have there, they are very, very important for the ecosystem, especially in cockpit country. It just has to be protected like a little baby, you know, like the most important baby of Jamaica, right. The cockpit country. So, yeah, so the caves are never, ever advertised anywhere. Like, Jamaica is not associated with the caves, even though the chances are, if you just walk away from the highway, the chances are you're standing above a cave. So it's just the caverns, it's just, whoa. Yeah, and of course the rivers and the waterfalls. There are over 100 waterfalls in Jamaica, yet people only know Dunn's River Falls. No, but so, by the way, exclusive for your interview only, I've never been to Dunn's River Falls.
Interesting.
Never. And I've never been to 9 Mile, Bob Marley's place. This is embarrassing. I've been to so many, but I just never had the chance to go. I just always, okay, I'll go there next time.
Right.
Next time. And I know what these places are, so I'm not particularly interested in them. In terms of, it's just, you know, packaged with a lot of stories. I've been by them,
right,
but I've never actually, you know, experienced. I need for my channel, but I will do it. Yeah.
So going back to 2014, 2 weeks, great time. Walk me through the thought process of, I'm moving to Jamaica, the logistics, obviously talking to your family, your partner, everything.
Okay, this is like, for how long would you like to hear that?
No,
like, half an hour, 1 hour, 5 minutes, couple of sentences, like how exactly? All right, let me put it this way. Unlike most people who might come to your podcast, I'd never planned relocating to Jamaica. I'd never had any connections with Jamaica, ever. The only thing I knew about Jamaica were just the stereotypes. The Cool Runnings movie, that was one of my favorite comedies back in the day when I was a teenager. And that's about it. Well, I heard of Bob Marley, but I wasn't a particular fan, you know, because I listened to rock music and that kind of music. So I never had a thing for Jamaica. Not like a lot of people, you know, they might have some family here, some friends, maybe they kind of love reggae or they love the lifestyle. Never. My dream was to live in Egypt. So because I studied Egyptology and this was one of my huge passions. And of course, I wanted to live in Egypt and I was ready to relocate there. The problem with Egypt is it's cold. It's really cold in winter.
I didn't know that.
It's really cold, like for me,
Okay.
right? It's really cold in winter. It gets, I don't know in Fahrenheit, but it gets like 10 Celsius in January in Cairo. So it's really cold. It even snowed in Egypt sometimes. Yeah, it can happen. Anyway, and it's the desert, so it gets really cold at night, right? So that was my dream. And I was like thinking, and then in general, Jamaica is my 10th country where I live. So I lived in the other 9 countries before actually moving here. So I never had Jamaica in my mind. So I was just looking for a country basically with no winter because I can't stand winter. Just can't stand it. For vacation, on holidays, for like traveling experience, yeah. But living in winter, no, ever. From the time I was 8 years old, I made a life goal to move to a country where there is no winter and where there is an access to the ocean or the sea. So these were the 2 main criteria. Everything else didn't matter. The standard of living, the job, whatnot, I didn't care about any of that. I'm an entrepreneur. So from that time, I knew that I had to create some sort of income that would allow me to live anywhere in the world. That's it. It had to be either passive income or it had to be some sort of job that I could do anywhere in the world. So I had different passions in life. It's easier to say what I'm not interested in. And in case you want to know later, I can tell you. There are actually only 3 things. But everything else was interesting for me. So it was really the question of what to pick. So, and at some point, I began teaching English as a foreign language.
Okay.
And apparently, I became quite good at it. So I did a diploma at Cambridge University as a teacher of English. And it's called CELTA. It's like a certificate of teaching English as a foreign language to adults.
Okay.
Right? So, and that kind of gave me an opportunity to work anywhere in the world. I did hear one of your guests on your podcasts who was talking about teaching English online. If you're a native speaker, you can just do it. Well, like with everything, of course, anyone can teach English. The question is the quality, right? And in order to teach anything, you really need to learn how to do it. You really need to, experience and everything, and only then. So that's what I was working on, and I began teaching IELTS. IELTS is a British exam. It stands for International English Language Teaching Service. Thank you. Jeez, man, I've been teaching IELTS for 20 years now. Okay, it stands for International English Language Testing System. My husband knows about it because that was my whole life. That exam became my whole life. Now, even though it sounds like an English test, it's actually a test that checks your IQ. It's a test that, I'm just trying to put in there. It's the test that sees whether the person has the life skills or doesn't, whether the person, it's like checks your analytical skills, communication skills. There's like the whole thing, right? And I became really good at it, and I launched my online IELTS preparation course. And that's how I began teaching online. That was in 2004, before any... even there was no Skype at that time, there was no YouTube at that time, definitely no Zoom or any other services, right? But I started teaching online through emails. So I was sending tests and like different theoretical parts and lessons to the people. And that's how I began making income online. At that time, I had already had a school of English in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine.
Okay.
I had 2 schools, basically. It's just one school, but I had 2 offices
Gotcha.
where other teachers have been working with me as a team. right? So I launched them using the English system. So this is how I made my first income in order to launch the courses online, and that's how I began making the income. Because the story about relocating anywhere doesn't have to be Jamaica, anywhere in the world. It's first of all, it's the story of how you're going to support yourself when you come to that country. My goal was to live anywhere. I wanted to live in any place in the world, and the income side was the most important one, and that's what happened at start. So this is the first part.
Yep.
Would you like to ask the second part? It would be easier. I don't know if you're going to cut out that because it's too long.
No, we're leaving everything in, even that part you just said. we're going with it. So you basically brought this skill set of making your money anywhere in the world that you worked on, I guess, 10 years prior, and you were able to initially do that when you moved here to Jamaica.
Well, I'm a teacher.
Right.
You know, like some people say, oh, your YouTube content is so educational. Well, because my primary profession, I'm a teacher. I'd been teaching from 1996, since I was 16 years old, as like giving like private English lessons, until 2017. So when I was already in Jamaica, but still. Yeah, so I'd been teaching all these years and coming up with different teaching methods and things like that. And online, all of this was online. I mean, on the first part of my life, I was teaching obviously in the classroom. But later, from 2004, it was only online.
So you initially came with that, and did you move to Montego Bay right off the bat when you moved to Jamaica?
Yes, when we relocated to Jamaica, we came to Montego Bay right away. And you see, that's the thing. For my husband, it was actually difficult, I would say, a little bit, the adaptation process, right? For me, it was nothing. I'm listening to so many people who are like talking like the culture shock and the challenges, and like, you know, again, for me, because it was my 10th country, I've been living in different places from when I was a little child. So when I was 6, we moved to different, like I was born in Kiev, so I lived in Kiev for the first 6 years of my life. Then when I was 6, Chernobyl happened in Ukraine. It's a huge tragedy, probably people know about it. And Kiev is rather close to Chernobyl. And my parents took me away to Azerbaijan, where I lived about a year. And then we went to Siberia for 3 years. And that's why I hate the cold weather. I lived for 3 years in Siberia, and I almost died of cold.
Oh my goodness.
Because I got my feet and, hands. I was coming back from school, and it was a huge snowstorm, and there were no cars, no buses and everything. I was like about 8. And I couldn't get anywhere. So it was 4 of us, the kids coming from school, right? And we couldn't get any help, and that's it. And then I woke up in hospital. So, and since then, I just cannot stand cold weather. I can't stand it. When I, after that incident, I went to school again. You know, luckily, I kept all my parts, so nothing. So it was done in timely manner. But when I went back to school after this incident, right, we had a lesson, geography lesson, and our teacher said, "Okay, today we're going to learn about like different parts of the world, and so here is the equator," and she was pointing at Africa. And she's like, "Look, this is where the weather is, blah, blah." And I'm like, this very day, I come back from school, open the door with my, foot, like, "Mom and Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to live in Africa." That's it, right? And they were laughing at me. But that, kept going. And then, so that was my passion. In short, I came to Jamaica for the weather. I stayed for the people. So that was, very unexpected, like the kind of society.
Yes.
I love Jamaican society. The sincere people. Oh, my goodness. I absolutely love that.
And how did your family and your friends feel when you got up and left?
Oh, they don't care because they know I'm...
Okay.
My parents were... absolutely incredible people. Like from the childhood, like when I travel from place to place, they were the ones taking me. So when I said, okay, guys, I decided to move to Jamaica. They were both alive at that time. And my parents passed away, unfortunately. But they were both alive at that time when I made a decision to move to Jamaica. And they were like, okay, if you say so. They didn't actually believe I was going to move.
Really?
No. They thought, but no, so that worked.
Okay.
So anyway, and but they were absolutely for it. Like, yeah, sure, if you want to. But again, that's because they were absolutely incredible people themselves, and they were the ones moving from place to place and dragging me along, so that I couldn't understand life without moving from place to place. And when we were not moving from one house to another house or from one city to another city, at that time we were just traveling. We would be just traveling. And that's how, I don't know how to live otherwise. The fact that I'm staying in Jamaica for 9 years, that's my record.
I was just going to ask, is that
the
longest?
That's my record.
Wow,
it's the longest. It's the longest. My husband was already like, you sure you don't want to go? I was considering Costa Rica. I was like, okay, so I'm going to live in Jamaica for some time, and then I'm going to move to Costa Rica, and then I'm going to move to somewhere else, and then somewhere else, just warm. But at the moment, I've decided for sure, if there is any other place where I'm going to live apart from Jamaica, it would be on the boat in the sea, because I'm crazy about sailing. Okay. So boat in the sea, that's it. Yeah, that's good, because I can always move.
Right.
You say I can always move. When I was applying for permanent residency in Jamaica, they asked me for my address, right? But because when I was filling out the form, I put my address in Jamaica, right? But by the time I brought the form to their office, I already moved to a different house. And then, so I was waiting. So I applied for permanent residency, right? And on one of these days, the officer is calling me and says, hi, Irina, we're like from PICA office. And I'm like, yeah, brilliant. He said, are you at home? And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, okay, I'm by your house now, so come outside and meet me. And I was at a different house.
Right.
I was at a different house. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to say? Like, guys, just, it's I haven't finished moving yet.
Right.
And it's like, and the house where I moved was actually much nicer than the house I rented before. And that officer, I don't know what he thought. Anyway, but he's like, so where exactly are you? But my husband was at our older property. He was just still, in there, around there packing into things. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming in a minute. He said, like, but you said you were at home. And I'm like, God, you think I'm a liar or something, right? Because I didn't even think of it, I didn't realize they would actually come to the house to check where I lived. But, Jamaica, they're really strict. They're really strict. When you're applying for permanent residency, the officer we had, amazing. He just went to, checked everything, like doing his job properly. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like properly. It's not, some people think, Jamaica, just relocate. Some people I know, actually, they were in Jamaica. They wanted to apply for work permit, right? And they didn't realize that they have to be outside of the country to do that, or they have to have some, visa. So they were deported.
Oh my goodness!
Because their visa expired, right? It wasn't fully expired yet. It was expiring. So they came to PICA office and said, "Can we extend it, please, to wait for the work permit when it's ready?" And they said, "Well, give your documents. We're going to look through." And they called them and say, "Sorry, it's denied. Just come back once you get your work permit. Come back." And they're like, "Okay, give us our passports." And they were like, we'll give them when you're at the airport, show us your tickets.
Wow.
So they showed the tickets and they said, brilliant, we'll see you at the airport. So they didn't even give them the passports back. So they met them at the airport. They walked them to the airplane, put them in an airplane, say thank you. So if you want to relocate to Jamaica, make sure you follow the rules, you follow the law, you get to the PICA officer, they would explain everything you need to know. But yeah, that's important.
Were those folks able to come back at some point?
Well, in about 1 week time after they left, their work permit went through, and it was given to them. But COVID was started.
Okay.
So they were like, okay, we'll come later. And they never came back till now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they are actually very talented IT specialists.
Okay.
So they just wanted to live here and run their company here and
Gotcha.
do the IT stuff here. But I mean, the point is that it is important that the country is doing this, because a lot of Jamaicans complain in how difficult it is to come to the United States or come to Canada or come to the UK. They don't want us there. They all need the visas. Guys, yeah, to come up to Jamaica on holiday, yeah, sure. But to relocate, you need to have all your documents in place. And also, I'm Ukrainian.
Right.
You see, if I was an American, it would have been easier. Definitely. Because Americans have more, I think it's half year or 1 year. 1 year you can be here without a visa, I think. Americans.
No, half year.
Half year?
Yeah, but you still need to get an extension.
Yeah, but you can get an extension up to 1 year,
and
then you have to leave. And then you have to come back or you have to do something. So you can't just come and live in Jamaica like people might assume.
Right.
No, you need to,
take the
and
proper
also,
steps.
if you come on a vacation, and you want to stay here for 6 months, you're not allowed to work unless you actually get a work permit.
That's right.
So, it's not something... so just want to say for Jamaicans, when you see foreigners working in Jamaica, right, it's not like they just came here and, started to work. No. They had to go through a lot of the things that you guys have to go through when you go to any country. So it's the same thing.
Right. And speaking of work, kind of taking a lateral step from your original career here, you also got into the Airbnb business while you were here. Yeah,
it was by accident. You know what? A lot of the things we do is by accident. You don't actually plan it. I think I'm sure you can speak to that as well. I wasn't planning to do Airbnb. My parents wanted to build a hotel, and they actually worked with Marriott. They were planning to build the first 5-star hotel in Kiev, in Ukraine, under the brand. There was only one 5-star hotel at that time, which wasn't an international brand. They wanted to build Marriott. So that was their one part of their business, right? But that never went through because of the Orange Revolution, and Ukraine always had issues because of our neighbor. But as a result, I had the idea about hotel business, and I was actually the one translating the business plan that my parents created for that hotel from Ukrainian to English. So I had to go through everything, including the financial parts and everything. So I was really and then the management and the operations and then all of it. And of course, because we had also friends who worked in the hospitality industry, so I was in. And then my husband worked at Hyatt Hotel for 4 years, and actually a really talented person for hospitality industry, was in banqueting service and food and beverage. So we kind of had the background, right? And then when we already moved to Jamaica, I was working online, doing my online school. And the owner of the house, which is Calypso Villa, beautiful place, beautiful house. It's just a local Jamaican house, home, right? But it had like several units, and the owners they're my friends. They're my really good friends. They're absolutely wonderful people. And one of the owners, he came to me, the husband, there's a husband and wife, right? He came to me and he said, Irina, do you have any friends who can come and stay here? If you bring them, I'll give you a little something, just split some. And I was like, let's go on Airbnb and find out how many friends I can find. I found quite a lot. By 2017, Calypso Villa became #1 Airbnb in Jamaica.
Amazing.
It was the most popular Airbnb in Jamaica at that time. In 2017, there was an article in Airbnb on the official Airbnb website where they just listed top 10 Airbnbs in the Caribbean, and Calypso Villa was one of them represented in Jamaica.
Amazing.
Airbnb contacted me and they made a video with me to show on the United Nations World Tourism Organization conference. And they did, so that was one of the... it was absolutely amazing.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was actually huge, yeah. And considering that Calypso Villa is just a private home, and it's very basic, it's just budget accommodation, you know, it's not like anything. We don't have any amenities there, nothing. It was absolutely amazing.
That's
experience.
great for you, but also really great for Jamaica to get that type of exposure.
Right, you know, it was brilliant. Yeah, it was really good. And I must say that Jamaica has incredible vision when it comes to Airbnbs. In terms of some countries, they prevent people doing Airbnb. They put all these laws in place. I think these laws come through some hotels and owners of some big hotels. Not the small hotels.
Right.
Even though the small hotels are the ones who are direct competitors with Airbnbs in terms of the market. But the big hotels, they don't like the idea of apparently people paying less for accommodation. But a lot of Airbnbs are actually luxury places that are way more expensive than any hotel. But still, the laws are being pushed so that Airbnbs would not be allowed, or they would have some restrictions. Like in certain countries, you can only host for 15 days a month. Or you can only put this property on Airbnb if you're still living on the property, so you can only rent out a room. So there is no freedom, nothing. So people can only make like a little bit additional income. Jamaica, on the other hand, especially the minister, Mr. Edmund Bartlett, the Minister of Tourism, he went out and he's like, push Airbnb, let the locals earn. And he went and he pushed that going amazing. Like a lot of people who don't read the business news, they don't even realize this is happening, because they read all the front pages about all the issues in Jamaica. They never get to the business section,
Right.
But it's actually really good what Jamaica is doing, allowing Airbnb, It has side effects.
Yeah.
Property prices rising because of that, because everybody thinks like, I have a property, I can do it on Airbnb because it's much easier. You have these long-term tenants who don't pay bills. They're terrible. But if I do Airbnb, that would be beautiful. And of course it isn't. It's just like you have long-term tenants who bother you every day. No, don't get me wrong. I love the guests.
Right.
And I can say it now because I'm not doing Airbnb from the 1st of March. I stopped doing Airbnb so that I could focus on my YouTube channel more.
Right.
The Calypso Villa is still on Airbnb. It's now just hosted by the owners and the absolute fantastic new manager they found, who we work closely together still.
Awesome.
So this is just, So people who want to book it, they can. If they're staying in Montego Bay, and when they're coming to Negril, they can stay at the Travelers.
Thank you.
That's how you do it.
So sticking with Airbnb, a lot of people out there watching this, they're considering that as a form of income, whether moving here like yourself or perhaps being some sort of summer getaway, second home that they can buy, purchase here, rent out while they're not here, and then come stay with their family in a vacation. Wow, what would you advise somebody in this 2023, somebody who's considering doing that here in Jamaica? What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, there are 3 videos on my channel about Airbnb and how to, there is a video, my story on how I launched Airbnb with all the tips, the challenges and the benefits you're getting. There is a video where I'm giving top 5 tips for running Airbnb in Jamaica, which directly answers the question you've just asked. And there is also a 3rd video showing how to launch your house, like your Airbnb, on Airbnb platform. So basically these 3 videos answer the question directly. But to make it short, one advice that I can give, you need to be in Jamaica to run Airbnb, or you need to find a person in Jamaica and pay good money to this person who would be happy to give out, give all the time that it needs to make the guests happy. With Airbnb, it's very important to have good rating and a superhost status. Superhost status is the one you get if your rating is 4.8 or higher, and 0 cancellations, 0. So it's very strict in this. If you have it, you're going to have the bookings, and you can keep the place going like fully booked. And then it's actually good money, but it's a lot of, it's good money for the owners, right? So if you have your property, you do that, right? But it is full-time job, and it's like proper business. It's proper business. It's not a side hustle.
Right.
Like a lot of people would assume, like, I'll just put my room there. I mean, if you put it there and just it gets booked, it gets booked. It doesn't get booked, it doesn't get. But the costs of running this room are very high. Like, if you have a hotel, you have X number of rooms. You can hire X number of people who will do the job. Now, if you have only one room, you cannot hire any of these people. You're just not going to have the income to cover the costs, right? And then the bills are crazy in Jamaica, with the electricity bills, right? And people say, I'm going to do the solar. If you're going to do the solar, it's going to take you 8.5 years before you get your money returned for the solar. I know because I calculated. Mm-hmm. Well, at least for just a smaller property, So it all depends. You can't just... You need the money to run the place. So ideally, you need to have 10 units on one, place. So once you start hiring people, if you have less than 10 units, you can still hire like one person, the manager and the housekeeper. But that's about it. And remember, if you're doing check-ins with no days off, you need to make sure you have the housekeeper available who would be able to do check-out, same-day check-in. And remember, some guests would want to stay a little later. After and you're not a hotel, you don't have a lobby, you don't have like where they can wait, or if they want to do like a late checkout, they can still leave the room but then stay on the property, go to a restaurant or be in the lobby. When you have your own property, you don't have any of these amenities. So as a result, a guest there has to check out at 11 because you have the next guest coming at 3, right? And you have to clean the whole thing, And then at 11, the guests are like, yeah, we're going to leave at 11. Absolutely, yeah. So 1 p.m., they're still there, right? And you're like, you can't really kick them out, can you? And they're like just slow. People are on vacation. They're in no rush. And, of course, you can't rush people, right? So, and then they're going to leave. Once we had a situation when guests were supposed to leave at 11, the other ones were supposed to arrive at 3, right? So these guys, they stayed a little longer until 12. And the other guys, they just arrived at 11:30. They just came early. Oh, we're just going to leave our bags. Just going to leave our bags. Where?
Right.
So, if you have a hotel, you have a place. So there are all sorts of things that come into play when you're running Airbnb because it is a business. If you're not treating it as a business, you're just going to lose your time and money. That's all. It's much easier. I have 3 properties in Ukraine. I do long-term rental only. And before the war, and now just long-term rental because I'm not there. Mm-hmm. And even though I do have a person who could have managed, it's technically, potentially, it's more money. But it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot. Now, long-term rental doesn't take, well, actually, it's passive income if you are lucky to have wonderful tenants. And I'm lucky. I have absolutely brilliant tenants. So, you see, so it depends.
Okay, so it's great advice. It seems like you said you got to treat it as a business, not this side thing that you're going to do. Do you think the Airbnb market in Jamaica is oversaturated?
It makes it very difficult for the visitors. The most saturated is actually Kingston. Kingston is it's packed with Airbnbs, especially these new apartments that are being built in Kingston. People are just buying them for the sake of doing Airbnb with them, The prices are rising because of that for the property, but the actual Airbnb prices are dropping because of the competition. So it's kind of, Is it a good investment? Well, if you have, as I said, if you have a good manager, then yes. If you are there by yourself and you're doing it for yourself, like a small business, good. But if you are, say, in Britain and you have a relative, because why hire a manager, right? So you can always ask your cousin or the mother of the cousin, or, that's how people often no, that's not going to work. You need to have a person who understands how hospitality, runs, and that's important. So yes, it is kind of oversaturated in Kingston. But then again, if you look at good quality Airbnbs, I mean, price versus value, right? So basically, if you're looking for something as a guest, it's actually very difficult to find. It's very difficult to find suitable Airbnb in Jamaica. Because remember, a lot of the residential property is not by the sea, and a lot of people want to stay by the sea. Right? So they come, they want to book. And in Montego Bay, this is like specific for Montego Bay, because the properties are advertised like 5 minutes drive to the sea, or 5 minutes, 5 minutes from the sea, not drive. 5 minutes from the sea, right? And then it turns out, like, to walk there is no way. There is, the sea is there, but there is no beach. There is no access to the sea because there are some hotels, and so it becomes really tricky for people. And so this is something like in Montego Bay, Calypso Villa is by the sea, the one that I used to manage, right? Sea Castles is by the sea, and properties at Freeport, they're by the sea. Now, we also have Montego Bay Club. It's called Mo Bay Club, which is right opposite Doctor's Cave Beach. This is kind of by the sea, right? Everything else, well, I don't mean to, give somebody away from this part, but for many other properties, not for everyone, but many other properties, they are in the hills.
Right.
Especially the gated communities, right? So you would need a car. Or you would need to spend, well, not you, the guest would need to spend money on taxi all the time. And taxi is not cheap. And that means if you have this Airbnb by yourself, you're going to have, a problem because guests are going to complain. Like your house is too far, so, and you can't change your location. No matter how you describe it, right? Guests would book it, they come, and they,
Have you seen a big difference I know you're out of the Airbnb industry now, but have you seen a big difference in the Airbnb industry from when you started to when you just recently got out in terms of demand, supply, new players, changes in, not necessarily the algorithm, but in terms of how guests view different properties and what they're looking for?
Well, first of all, I'm not really out of Airbnb business in terms of I'm tracking it still. I run, apart from my YouTube channel, my husband and I, we launched a tour company. Right. So, and a lot of the tours that we do.
What's the name of it, by the way?
It's called Irie Lab Tours. So Irie Lab is the name of my company, and the website is irielab.com. That's the reason why it's the name of the company. That domain name was still available. And I thought it was such a cool thing because we make cool tours, Irie tours. Nice. So it's Irie Lab. Anyway, so we have a team of fantastic drivers and guides. It's very important because it's easy to find a driver in Jamaica. It's very difficult to find someone who's a really professional quality guide. And we work with them with contractors, so we don't pay salaries. They're the ones who are making most income that comes from the tours. And we're getting just like their agent, basically. Gotcha. Right. So that's the difference between this and some other tour companies that run in Jamaica, right? And the other thing, we do pickups from Airbnbs. That's why I brought it up now, because they have to know where Airbnbs are located. And remember, a lot of those Airbnbs are in the hills. Yeah. So no tour company wants to go there and pick people up because they go, come to the entrance to a hotel. So they do the pickups from the hotel. Like in TripAdvisor, if we do advertise the tours on TripAdvisor, there is not even an option to add these Airbnbs. You can only add the hotels. So we have the hotels and then the meeting point, but then, so I'm still very much into Airbnb business. But to answer your question, The difference between now and what was in 2014 is huge, but we shouldn't forget about the COVID part. Because during the COVID part, there were a lot of problems with Airbnb, with everything related to Airbnb, actually. And so if we take these years out and kind of ignore them, the market is recovering now.
I see.
And it's getting into a huge recovery mode right now, yeah? So we're getting like fully booked. Before I stopped working with Calypso Villa, I launched it on Booking.com to see how the Booking.com platform works, right? And whoa, man, there's like fully booked. So if you're running a property, you shouldn't be just considering Airbnb. Booking.com gives way more guests, actually. Way more guests, but a very different type of guests. So it's really, I was just testing to see the market, right? So I'm very much still in that market. Of course, it's better. It would have been better if you started Airbnb back in 2015. But what Airbnb did, in order to kind of make people equal and make it easier for newcomers to start, they're actually cutting the reviews now. So for someone like we had 5,000 reviews, right? Because we've been working on Airbnb for so long. And like when I closed down my account, well, I didn't really close it, but when I stopped working with Calypso Villa, I had only 1,400 reviews, somewhere around that, because the rest were not, like, they're just keeping the reviews in the last year. They're just ignoring all the reviews we had. Yeah.
That doesn't seem fair at all.
It is fair to newcomers.
Right, but
because otherwise you can't even lift. Imagine
you
have these
saying.
Monsters with 5,000 reviews. Yeah, it's like you come. What are you gonna do? Do you know what I mean? And you have like one review. You're just starting. People not gonna book with you. Do you know what I mean? So, and then again, if you think about it, who's gonna read 5,000 reviews anyway?
Right.
Who cares? They're all like 4 years ago. You know, they're irrelevant. To the most part, because things changed, do you know? So there you go. So it is okay to start now.
Okay.
And Airbnb has grown, like growth of Airbnb in Jamaica was one of the fastest in the world. So Airbnb grew in Jamaica faster than in anywhere else in the world. Wow. And that was one of the reasons why Airbnb was running the, presenting this information, this statistics at United Nations World Tourism Organization Conference in 2017.
Interesting. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about your YouTube channel and what you do and how you do it. And as I mentioned earlier, I do think you're bringing something very unique to the Jamaican YouTube market. And I also think what we're doing here is very important. And one of my philosophies is that, and we're both obviously very pro-Jamaica, but one of my philosophies in the YouTube industry of Jamaica is that if we as Jamaican YouTubers can do well as a country, because we're competing internationally, you know, and I think that's something that we really have to drive into our heads here, is that we're not necessarily competing against each other, but internationally. And to me, the more eyeballs that we can get on Jamaica, and especially the positive aspects of Jamaica, not to say that we don't have our challenges, the better, and a rising tide lifts all ships. And again, I want to reemphasize what we're doing here is very important, and what you're doing individually is also very important. And when I look at the Jamaica YouTube market, and I definitely put you like in a different category, because your style and approach and really the thoroughness, and this is the word that my dad uses to describe your content that you create, it to me, it forces everybody else to get better within the Jamaican YouTube realm, right? And that's what we want, and that's what we need. And so you have set this standard that, again, I hope others are looking at, because I know I'm looking at it, right? And for us to get better as an industry and as a market. And I think one of the elements, a big element that you bring to it, is your journalism background, your professional journalism background. And how did you think to bring that and put that together on a channel that you were going to create about Jamaica?
Okay. Okay, where do I start in this case? Well, first of all, as I said, I'm a teacher. I studied journalism in England at City University. Is actually one of the best universities where you can do journalism. So, incredible university, and I never finished the degree. When I had a few weeks left, I was like, no, I don't want to be a journalist. I hate it. I never, ever want to do any journalism. So I left and went to do something completely different. And so I never thought I would ever find myself making videos or documentaries or whatnot. The channel does look different simply because I have a very different approach, and also because I'm an entrepreneur and a teacher. So I put these things into it. And this channel, specifically this channel, when I launched it, I had already had the experience. Is it the correct tense I'm using?
Yes.
I was just wondering. So I had already had the experience with 4 other channels.
Gotcha.
So I tried that, I tried this, and it kept failing. It was so terrible. And you mentioned that the standard, the quality whatnot. I think it's terrible.
What?
There is just like every time I make a video, I like the people in the video who I'm filming about, but I absolutely hate my work. No, because the light is no good, the sound is no good, the pictures, the frame is wrong. This is I'm just so.
I think you're being overcritical.
No, but that's the thing, and I'm never happy with the work when I finish it, and I try to make it better next time. And now moved to a new studio, and I have absolutely terrible sound in that studio. And I'm so upset about it because I can't fix it because it's such a small room. And compared to the sound I had in my previous studio, it's not. So I'm still thinking what I'm going to do about it. But it is important that we have as many YouTubers in Jamaica as possible.
Absolutely.
As many as possible because of 2 things. Number one, the more YouTubers in Jamaica we have, the more Jamaican content we have. And it absolutely doesn't matter what you make the videos about. As long as they're shot in Jamaica, by Jamaicans or by foreigners, it doesn't matter really. As long as you're making these videos in Jamaica, brilliant. And people currently, I see that people are making a lot of vlogs, right? And, about like visiting different places. Maybe one of my favorite channels is actually Spearfish in Jamaica.
Yeah, same here.
I absolutely love his videos.
Love it.
And I must say, I don't actually watch that many videos. Remember, we spoke yesterday and you were like, did you watch that show? Did you watch that show? Did you watch that? I was like, nope. No idea what you're talking about. I don't watch Netflix. I don't watch HBO. I don't. I watch Hollywood, and I watch. I watch some films, like the ones that make me think, and I watch YouTube, or listen rather. So if we're talking about content that is produced in Jamaica, it's important that people pick the subject they're really passionate about. You don't have to be like that other YouTuber. You love podcasts. You have Mr. Rohan as your, role model for podcasts. Brilliant. Then do podcasts. Don't try to do vlogs. Don't try to do, documentaries or guides or whatnot, right? If you love cookout and nature and stuff, do that. Don't try to also blog about cosmetics or beauty or some stuff. Just pick one, because this is what YouTube is all about. You just pick one thing and you stick to it. I picked a channel to promote Jamaica in a kind of documentary format. Yes, there are different subcategories that I have, but they all match the main point: to promote Jamaica to foreigners, to expats, and to Jamaicans themselves. That wasn't planned, but I realized that a lot of people in Jamaica really don't understand what they have. They really, they take things for granted. They really do. And the other thing is that people often don't realize is that YouTube works in such a way, right? Somebody's searching for something, right? And let's say they find my video about a marketplace in Jamaica. They click on that video and they're going to watch it. Now, all the other videos on the topic of a marketplace in Jamaica are going to be recommended to this person now. So as a result, if we have a lot of YouTubers, maybe even like small YouTubers, right, that just have like small content, like produce few videos, maybe not of like professional levels, just starting, but their videos will be recommended if someone else's videos are watched on the subject. And this is something that I find absolutely crazy. Some people writing to me in the comments like, oh, why is this foreigner talking about Jamaica? Why isn't Jamaicans are doing this and this and this? Well, first of all, they are doing this and this and this, and they're actually very good at it. Mm-hmm. My channel is nowhere even close to the number of views and to the popularity, the number of subscribers, as some channels that are run by Jamaicans. And there are plenty of excellent Jamaican YouTubers, mm-hmm. right? But we need more. We need even more. But that doesn't mean that foreigners shouldn't talk about Jamaica, because it's just a different perspective, you know? And also, if these foreigners or whoever makes a video about Jamaica on a certain subject, all the other YouTubers, Jamaicans, non-Jamaicans, who are making the videos on this very same subject, gonna be... So your phrase about the tide lifting all the boats is precise, like it's perfect for YouTube concept, like for the way YouTube works. So the more people you have talking about Jamaica, the better. Right. Tourists making vlogs about Jamaica, brilliant. People who understand nothing about Jamaica making absolutely nonsense vlogs, good. People who know everything about Jamaica but make really boring vlogs, good. You know, anything, as the more Jamaica is mentioned in YouTube, the better. There are people who say that Jamaica is a brand in itself. You know, Jamaica is a brand. The thing is, though, it's absolutely true, right? But when it comes to YouTube, because the population of Jamaica is so small, and honestly, the people who are watching the content about Jamaica are mostly Jamaicans, mm-hmm. right? You would have Jamaicans diaspora and Jamaicans in Jamaica. Foreigners would watch content about Jamaica either before their travel, right? So before their trip. If they're coming to Jamaica, they would go through the videos, right? Or if, for instance, they're planning to relocate to Jamaica, or they have a Jamaican boyfriend mm-hmm. or girlfriend, which is more rare, but still, right? Other than that, they would watch a few videos and that's it. They might even subscribe, but then it's not going to be relevant for them anymore. So the people who stick to the content about Jamaica are Jamaicans. And the number of such people, I mean, potentially, the number of such people is under 10 million. Like the total, like we have 3 million Jamaica, 3 million diaspora. Maybe a little extra, right? So it's 6 million approximately, maybe more, right? Plus the people who are interested in Jamaica, so another like 4 million, okay? That's the potential market we have, which is only 10 million. Right. Which is nothing compared to Japan, compared to the United States market, compared to all of that. So when people say like, oh, you're using Jamaican brand to, you know, promote your videos and blah, blah, blah. I am Ukrainian. If I make content about Ukraine now, the number of views, do you understand? Absolutely. So, but even then, if I was making a content about the United States or about the United Kingdom, or actually on any of the popular topics, the popular topics are beauty, I don't know, cars, tech videos, unpacking videos, cooking. I mean, there are all sorts of markets where you can make, if your goal is to make money on YouTube. Gaming. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, you have to have passion for it. Like I have passion for video games. And one of my ideas was to actually make a channel with World of Warcraft, gameplay and all sorts of ideas I had about it, right? So that would have been actually way more profitable than what I'm doing now because, of course, I'm not losing as much money as Throp is losing.
You say that again.
You were losing so much money. Oh my goodness. Yep. When I see how much you invest into this, I'm like, my gosh, you know, I don't invest even a fraction of this, right? Mm-hmm. Yet I still work, like when I edit videos until my eyes bleed. I'm like 14 days a week. I don't take days off. I have only 2 days off a year. And when I have this situation, you know, I can't afford to make content that nobody watches.
Right.
But still, I'm making the content on this topic because I understand it's important.
Yeah.
To know. And in the long run as well, these are evergreen videos. No matter how many years pass by, these will still be relevant.
Absolutely right.
You see? And the kind of podcasts you make with all the people who come to your channel to watch, like to listen the stories of how to relocate to Jamaica, about investing into Jamaica and how important it is to invest to Jamaica from foreign. There is a lot of talks like, oh, those foreigners, they come, they bring their money here, and that's a good thing. You know, there is a huge difference between coming and investing into a country, bringing your own money, putting it into a country, and then maybe reaping the benefits, while 80% of the income you earn still stays in Jamaica.
Right.
Like a hotel, right? The people complaining about the foreigners who invest into hotels, right? They come, they bring billions of dollars, not millions even, you know. They bring here, they build a hotel, it works here, 80% stay, well, okay, maybe less, maybe a little bit less, but it's not like they're making such huge profits. If they do, brilliant, but they're leaving a lot of money here. All the food is bought like from Jamaica, why would they buy food from elsewhere if they can get it here? Mm-hmm. They're not going to do it. It's not profitable. You know, they support the local market. They support everything in terms of all this money stays in Jamaica. If there wasn't this foreigner who came and invested the money, how else Jamaica is going to get the money to grow the economy?
Right.
That's the thing, and a lot of people don't realize it. They think, oh, they come, they take the land, and then they can make money. Nothing's left for Jamaica. Oh, come on. Most is actually left for Jamaica.
I will say a little pushback on that is that some hotels operate that way. And we did a study with the Jamaica Hotel and Tours Association. I believe it was 2012. That's when I was involved in it. And what they found in the financial study that was done by a group from Oxford was that the local Jamaican hotels are paying exponentially more money in real dollars. Real dollars that are staying in the country in Jamaica. And what is happening with, I'm not saying all of the big hotels, but some of the big hotels, and many of them actually, that in their home countries is when those credit cards are swiped for their rooms, that's staying in those foreign banks, and they're not coming to Jamaica. And trust me, I'm not against these hotels and foreign direct investment coming here. I think it's very important. It provides job. It's direct money coming into the economy. It's also more people coming to Jamaica. We have a bigger footprint on the global market. Where I would say my issue is with this is when it comes to an even playing field with smaller hotels and those larger hotels. That's where I would take issue as a smaller hotel, because these companies, rightfully so, they're highly incentivized to come to Jamaica and to invest here, because they could be taking their investment to the Dominican Republic or other countries. But we'd rather, of course, have these properties come here and develop here at the end of the day. The argument of small hotels, I would say, and I'm not speaking for all small hotels, but I'll speak for our small hotel, it's like, is there a way we can even the playing field to make us more competitive?
No, you can't. You cannot. Mm-hmm. For the same reasons why you're going to always buy the products of one very same company all the time. Dog food, baby food, chocolates, and it's all going to be Nestle. It's all going to be this one company that covers that market. No matter what you do, you can have, I don't know, until it goes bust, of course, but, which is very unlikely in the nearest time. They just own the market. They own, like, I don't know how many brands, like 300 brands. I'm not sure. That's how many brands they have and how much finances they have at the back. So, like, to back them up, right? You cannot compete with them, and you shouldn't. Like with bigger players like this. Then again, what you're saying is totally correct, but that's a different argument.
Right.
That's a completely different argument from the one I was, referring to. Even when you said about the swiping the cards, the money stays in that bank. Well, how does the hotel pay for all the maintenance, for all the land upkeep? I don't mean salaries now. I mean the actual, required materials for that, right? How do they pay for all the food that goes into all-inclusive, right? Okay, they all-inclusive hotels also buy drinks and kind of food that you cannot get in Jamaica, right? Mm-hmm. They buy it from foreign. But a lot of the stuff they buy from local farms. They use the local services. So it's it's driving the market.
I agree.
Right? Don't forget that it's also tours. So when guests are going on a tour, they're spending their money in all of these places. Now, of course, if they book with the very same company, then some of this money would obviously stay elsewhere, but they have to pay for fuel here in Jamaica. They have to pay for the car maintenance here in Jamaica. So it's actually when I did the research on how much local economy benefits from hotels that are not directly linked to Jamaica in any way, right? It turned out that it's actually much more than people think. It's way more. Now, with the incentives and about the taxes and all that, that's a different issue. And that's something that locally grown hotels need to, bring up in discussions and do something about it, because it doesn't mean that those guys shouldn't be getting the incentives.
Agreed.
It means that the local hotels should be getting the incentives.
Right.
Now, we shouldn't forget that Jamaica has its own brands of hotels. They all include like Sandals, Couples, and, these are Jamaican brands. Because often people say, oh, those foreign hotels. Well, Sandals is a Jamaican hotel. Couples is a Jamaican hotel. It's an all-inclusive, but it's Jamaican. It's a Jamaican brand that takes over other islands, by the way.
Yeah. And I agree, like the economic impact of these big hotels, it's important. And there's no doubt they really do drive the economy. And yeah, we shouldn't necessarily be looking at just a linear outlook in terms of, like I brought up the example of the dollar staying there, but they are, I think at the end of the day, I am pro this. I am pro these hotels coming in. I don't have a problem with it. I really don't.
Taking over the beaches.
I mean, like my whole thing is like, again, when we look at local entrepreneurs and local hotel owners, it's important that we have incentives that allow us to keep up with the competition. And it is competition. We're not in direct competition with these larger hotels, and we don't compete on price or anything like that. And I'll speak from our perspective, is we compete on value for money and the authentic Jamaican experience. And not necessarily saying that you don't get that there, but I feel like we're closer to what Jamaica is in many respects. And of course, that's a very biased opinion, and I'm okay.
No,
okay
you're
with
totally
that.
right. No, the thing is, when people travel, like when I traveled, as I mentioned, I traveled in a lot of places. And at some point, my parents were always staying in all-inclusive hotels. Well, like maybe not all-inclusive, but all the 5-star hotels.
Right.
One of the favorite brands was Hyatt, actually. It's where most of our stays, and then Marriott became our favorite. So that's where we stayed all the time. We went to Hawaii, Maui, and we stayed in Ritz-Carlton. I hated it. Nothing bad about Ritz-Carlton. I just hated that lifestyle. I would always run away. So on one of those trips, I went to Malaysia for 1 month, and my idea was to live to Borneo Island. My idea was to go in the rainforest and live with the locals there, right? Because I wanted to learn how to survive in a situation when you have basically no running water, no electricity, nothing, right? And there are some people, the Iban tribe on Borneo Island, the ones who I spent a month with, amazing people. They were the ones, right, who I wanted to stay with. But of course, as I was going, my parents were like, we're going to book you like a nice hotel, right? So I had this hotel booked for 1 month, the 5-star. Came there, I left my big bag of things there. I grabbed my camera, I grabbed my stuff, like just a small rucksack, and I was just sitting there. So, and I spent a month living in these conditions. I learned all about insects, and because in Borneo is not the same as Jamaica, which is very safe when it comes to all sorts of things. You don't have ants of this size, and and you don't have the spiders and the snakes and the jaguars, and so Borneo was absolutely incredible experience. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because an all-inclusive hotel, they're all the same. Do you know what I mean? They're all the same. They're just boring in terms of, okay, every all-inclusive hotel has its own feature, you know, the brand itself, right? And it's the standard that they have that makes the value of staying in these hotels important. I really respect a lot of the, you know, businesses that run and that turn their hotel industry into this network. And I'm now talking not about Jamaican brands, just about, I'm mostly now talk about these huge brands like Hyatt, like, you know, Marriott is actually part of it. It's the Sheraton group. I think they're parts. I don't know now because it's been a while since I looked through, but they are actually these different brands. They're under one umbrella. So it's just... And I do respect the fact how they built their empires when it comes to hotel industry. And again, a lot of them started from nothing. So, but the thing is, today, with traveling, the most important thing about traveling is what you see outside of the hotel. So why have all these, you know, amenities if the goal is to explore the country? Now, with Jamaica, though, a lot of people are coming to Jamaica to be able to relax. Sometimes they don't want to explore the country, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just want to come, all-inclusive, the bar, chill, have a drink, have food, and think about nothing.
Right.
Which is brilliant. That's also great. And the all-inclusive hotels come, like, brilliant. But there are also those who come to Jamaica only once in their lifetime, and they come for, like, 2 weeks, and they've been saving up for this holiday like several years, and they come here and spend all 2 weeks in a hotel. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. What is more, choosing an all-inclusive hotel that is exactly the same one as in Mexico or in Costa Rica or in somewhere else in the Caribbean, it would be pretty much the same thing, like same standards, same kind of vibes. It's like, you know, it's better to choose some smaller hotels so that you can, and if, okay, depending on your budget, right? If you want something, you don't have a big budget, fine, book a budget one. If you have the budget and you think, you know, I want to treat myself, fine, book a villa. Don't book all inclusive, book a villa. Do you know? Just have local experience. So
it's hard. I mean, I'm not one to go to all-inclusives. I've tried, like anywhere in the world, not just here. It's just not my type of accommodation. And, you know, to each their own. My friends that I grew up with in New York and that from my childhood, that's their thing. It's like, it's very American, I would say, that like, this is what they book. Like, this is what they know. This is what they go for. Like everybody I know, it's just like all inclusive. They want to pay their money. They don't want, like you said, they don't want to think about anything. I also think it comes down to a little bit of lifestyle, like you said as well. They just hang out at the pool bar. They just get their little cups that they bring with them, and they just keep filling it up with alcohol. And like that's all they do the entire day. Now,
remember, all inclusive is a Jamaican invention at the end of the day. Now, of course, the first guys who offered kind of all-inclusive service were the French, I think, is 1930s, 1940s. I don't know. It's somewhere between 1930s to 1950s, somewhere around there, right? Then in Jamaica, the Frenchman's Cove Hotel, they started doing something like all-inclusive, when food was included, like a buffet and things like that, right? But it was the couples, I believe, that were pushing the Issa family, who were pushing like the proper all-inclusive concept. That was very different from anywhere else in the world. Like that changed the whole hotel industry completely. Like the all-inclusive thing. I would be making a video on that on my channel at some point. Hopefully, not too long, not too far in the future. But the fact that it is a Jamaican concept. We should be proud of that.
I think so.
Jamaicans, Jamaicans should be proud of it. The issue that I personally find is the Beach Act that would allow people to grab the part of the beach, and it is a problem because a lot of the beaches end up being locked out from the locals. Now, you don't have that issue in Negril. luckily, 7 Mile Beach, basically accessible for all the people. Maybe not all people know that, actually, because from the main roads, you can't just come to the beach just anywhere. There are certain places that you have to use. So, but in Montego Bay, there aren't that many beaches in Montego Bay, and even the ones that we do have, were kind of taken over.
Yeah.
Again, I'll be making a video on that. Because it's not as bad as people think. Because there is also like all the beaches are gone to the hotels. No.
Yeah, I get that comment under my videos a lot. Excuse me. People complaining that like all these beaches are private and they're being eaten up by all these foreign businesses. And I go in there and I'm like, look, Negril is completely public. Nobody can tell you, no property owner, that you can't walk or you can't hang out, or there may be like, obviously you probably can't use their beach chairs or that sort of thing, but you have access. You have the ability to do that. We are losing have lost a couple of beach areas that were public that have become private, but there are still large, in terms of like going, hanging out, picnic, that sort of thing. But large part of Negril is, all of Negril, I should say, is a public beach, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. At least, like what we think as like whether Chamber of Commerce, JTA, like we want to keep it that way.
That's a perfect way. Yeah. And by the way, the other parts of Jamaica should just learn from that, I guess. Well, the other parts, mainly Montego Bay, because Ocho Rios doesn't have that many beaches in general, right? So there are a few, but they are public beaches. Some you have to pay to enter. So this is another thing. People would call these beaches private beaches, because you have to pay to enter, but they are open to the public for a fee.
Right.
Do you see? Okay, so the beaches can be divided into 3 types, right? You have a public beach, which is free to the public. You can come there anytime you want. A private beach, which you can visit for a very small fee. And basically that fee really goes into just maintaining the beach. It's like the bathrooms. I
was going to say, yeah.
The bills for electricity, like the changing rooms, and maybe just to clean up the property, and maybe to build these groins, the ones to make sure the beach doesn't disappear in the first place, right? And then you have the private beaches where you cannot just go for the beach. You have to book a hotel or you have to book a private event to be able to visit this beach. So these are 3 absolutely different types, but people often address the public beaches where you have to pay a small fee. And when I say small fees, from $6 to so it's about 1,000 Jamaican dollars, right? Which is often less than the actual, rice and peas and fried chicken. It's the same, but then you have the whole day there. So this is very important that people understand that these beaches are available to the locals. And most people who use them are the locals. Tourists don't go there. I mean, they. And what I also find that is a problem with the beaches is that people simply don't know they're there, and that the beaches that are public and free, a lot of them are in such condition that people just don't want to go there because of plastic, because of seaweed, because nobody looks after them. Do you know what I mean? So people say, oh, this beach is taken by the hotel. Well, there is a public beach. Well, here you go, Sea Castles, which is the place near Montego Bay. Well, it's technically Montego Bay still. There is a beach that's huge, really nice beach. Nobody goes there. Open to the public, free to enter. Please, nobody goes. Why? Because it's not clean. Yeah. It's not maintained. Who's going to maintain the beach? Oh, just local people. Who are you going to go and clean that? Right. No, you have to pay somebody to do that, because nobody wants to work for free. But then if you're paying this person, where are you getting this money from? To pay this person. And that's why, people are just charging a little fee for it.
No, looking forward to that video. Can't
because
wait.
I want to actually finish my research, because there is a lot, and I actually found quite a lot of surprising information about this as well. Okay. And I want to put these statistics and the documents to support whatever I say, So this is important.
Okay. I want to take a lateral step
Sure.
back to YouTube
Okay.
and kind of get a little bit more into, not necessarily the weeds, but you had mentioned and I don't think people really understand like the challenges and what it takes to do what you do or do what we do. What do you find is the biggest challenge in being a YouTuber?
Having not enough time.
Preach.
I just absolutely right. It's 24 hours a day. Can I complain how short I'm? This is one. The other thing is that I have to sleep sometimes. This is so annoying. It takes up so much of my time. Imagine 8 hours a day. That's terrible. I could have made so much work. Anyway, but on a serious note, probably the most challenging is the situation when you input so much into the video, you publish it, and people are just not interested not because something's wrong with the video, but rather because the topic is not the kind of topic a lot of people would be interested in. Or it's an important topic, especially if the subject goes into anything like social issues, unless it's a social issue that you put under the right angle or something, right? Like I made a video on recycling. Who cares, Yeah, Jamaica has a plastic. Move on. Come on. Give us something. It's just that people are not interested. Now, I'm not saying all people are. That video has like over 20,000 views, which is for the amount of money and time I put into that video, this is like nothing. Obviously, I didn't get my money back that I invested into that video. However, I am launching the recycling project just with the goal to help the recycling going on in Jamaica. The best thing is not to have any plastic at all, right?
Yes.
But this is not possible in the nearest time. Well, at least single-use plastic, right? But the point is, when you make these videos, right, people are not watching them as much as some absolutely ridiculous videos. Like I have a video about certain things that I find to be less important. Mm-hmm. One of the most popular videos on my channel is how I debunk one guy who claimed he was a diplomat and he's not. So it's a fake diplomat.
I remember that video, yes.
He was like bashing Jamaica, right?
Yep.
And it was such an easy video to make. It was like extremely easy. Mm-hmm. And also one of my patrons, I have a fantastic patron, Zach. He keeps helping with research sometimes. He helps me with all sorts of things. And he was the one who helped me with the research for that video. And I was actually in the middle of a trip to Ukraine. At that time, that was before the war. Mm-hmm. And he was helping me out with this. And I was editing this video at the airport in Frankfurt because it was just so easy. Do you know, when you just, chill. So it took me very little time to make. One of the most popular videos on my channel. Wow. Do you know? And I was like, it's just so unfair. So this unfairness is what probably the biggest challenge for me on YouTube. Absolutely. It's just unfair. Mm-hmm. The videos that I put so much effort into, sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't do well. The videos that, usually the videos that I put the least effort are the ones that are the most popular.
There you go. I guess on the opposite side of that, what do you enjoy the most about being a YouTuber?
I'm an introvert. People might not know that because I'm always, I actually love to be by myself, but I also love to be interviewing interesting people. Mm-hmm. So YouTube gives the opportunity to kind of surprise people with something they never knew, or with somebody they didn't even know that such person exists, and then they watch the person and learn from this person, and the ability to share that with people. This is probably one of the most incredible things about being a YouTuber, that you have the chance to share with people what you know or what you found out, and it's just a feeling like, wow, really? really, this man is like incredible artist. Like I had just a video recently that did really well, actually, surprisingly. I never thought people would watch an interview about art, but so many people watched it, and it's because, of course, Mark Anthony Hill is the talent in that video, and he's whoa, he's just incredible. So interviewing him I was like learning, like taking notes with my camera, and then watching and taking notes. It's just incredible. So this is the aspect I love one of the most. And the second aspect, because I'm an introvert, because I love being by myself, I really love editing. I edit all my videos, and I cannot imagine giving this work to somebody like the delegates.
Yeah.
Because it's the storytelling. And when I edit the video, I can tell the story to make it with like different moments to make it more interesting, exciting. And then I love to see the reaction. The third thing about YouTube, so I said 2 or 3, is the instant reaction.
Yeah.
This is something you never get from teaching. When I taught English or preparation for IELTS, I had to wait until, some time and then to see the results.
Right.
In general, teaching is something you do and you may be lucky to see the results in 10 years' time. It's not something you see right away.
Right.
With books, like I wrote a couple of books all on education for IELTS, right? So I read that. People buy the book, rarely they write back to me. Well, some do write back to me with a review, but that's not necessary. That's not something they do for sure, right? And you never know. But with YouTube, you publish the video, right away you're like, okay.
Yep.
So what are people going to say? What do they think? What maybe there is, and people often find things I didn't even, I didn't put this into that video, but people find that and then they comment on that and I'm like, oh, okay. And so these are the 3 most important things that YouTube gives that no other kind of journalistic work can give.
Awesome. And what kind of plans do you have for your channel, and what are your dreams? I want to hear about them.
I need a team. I really do. I need journalists. I want to find Jamaican journalists or journalists residents in Jamaica. Maybe they're not Jamaican. Okay, fine. As long as they're residents here, because I don't want to. Online work with this kind of work is more complicated. So the way I see it, right, I do have a certain plan for my channel as in how I want to develop it. And I had it from start. Unfortunately, because of the war in Ukraine, my plan got completely messed up. So I had the channel going. I knew I want to publish this and this. I actually had the videos lined up, which video after which video I want to post, right? And when the war started, all these plans went to nowhere. That's it. I canceled them all. And I was like, okay, I have to sort this out first and then see what's happening. So, and as a result, with YouTube, if you don't post for a certain amount of time, well, maybe you don't know, I don't know, it's not going to show your content when you start uploading again. And as a result, your viewership basically drops, everything drops, and you basically have to start from scratch, which is even more difficult than starting a new channel altogether, because what happens is that you publish a video, your subscribers don't watch it because they don't know that the video is out. The YouTube doesn't recommend it, right? Because you've been somewhere in Ukraine. And then the YouTube algorithm sees that nobody's watching the video. So, it's not recommended to anyone else. And then it's just nobody's watching it. And it's just, the channel is dying. And that's one of the reasons, actually, I hit 90,000 subscribers yesterday.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congrats.
So there's only 10,000 left.
There we go.
Come on. Drop subscribers.
Yeah, get on that.
Get on. No, don't subscribe unless you're going to watch the videos, though. It's important, by the way.
Yeah.
If you have lots of subscribers and they're not watching your content, that's going to mess up the channel. So if anyone wants to do harm to a YouTube channel, just subscribe to it and never watch the content. No, but seriously, that can be a problem. Huh? But yeah, so this messed up my whole, basically YouTube channel life. So now I kind of starting again from not from scratch, of course, but with some interesting videos. And my goal is to produce at least 4 videos a week. A week.
Wow.
I wish. A month.
Right.
A month, maybe more. All right. It is physically possible for me to do that, even by myself, if I don't have all the other jobs I have. Because remember, I used to run Airbnb, and that was taking 60% of my time, while not bringing the income or whatnot.
Yeah.
But, I loved it. I loved the guests. Such wonderful people. I met so many incredible.
But yeah, life gets in the way of YouTube dreams, and it happens.
Life always gets in the way.
Yeah,
Yeah, but anyway, so the plan now at the moment is to focus on video production for the channel, and see, because I do have different ideas of how I want to organize the videos and see the plan, the time. But again, sometimes I have to work on certain videos. They take a lot of research. Like currently I'm working on Paul Bogle video about the portrait of Paul Bogle and all the controversy around that portrait. And I was hoping that the research is going to take like a month. It has already taken me 4 months.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and I'm not even there yet. I found absolutely incredible information. So I hope that video is going to be probably one of the most popular in my channel. No, probably I shouldn't say that. Maybe it won't be.
No,
it won't be.
We will
no,
try
it
to
won't be.
help
No one's going to watch
happen.
it. No one's going to watch it.
We will watch it. Everybody here is going to watch it.
Anyway, but I really hope, because so much effort and
I
so
can
much
imagine,
time and everything I'm putting. And of course, while I'm doing that, I can't do something else.
Right.
So, but I still have to post something. Otherwise, YouTube is going to say, you're not posting anything. So I have to still post something. But then that something also takes a lot of, I can't just post it because whatever.
Right.
I have to make sure the content is good. You know how I film, right? So I this and pre-plan and did it, So, and, of course, for everybody, right, there's going to be an interview with Throp on my channel now about Throp and your projects and everything. So, of course, please make sure, once I launch it, I don't know who's going to post first.
I don't know either.
No idea, right? So whoever posts first, right, and then whoever posts second is going to give the link to the first. So we're just going to work this way.
Yeah. Everybody's going to watch each other's videos.
Yeah, right. So that's going to work. Actually, this is the very first, proper collab I'm doing. Yeah, I did collab with Swaggy. That I wouldn't consider that. That wasn't a particular collab. Actually, it was one of the most incredible videos on my channel. I got so many patrons from it.
Oh, really?
I had so many views. I didn't expect. And, I was expecting a lot of hate comments, and I was waiting for the hate comments, right? And people were writing, why are you keeping all these hate comments? How do you cope with all these people giving you hate? And I'm like, there's something expected. What I didn't expect is how much support I got because of that video.
Yeah.
People literally, I had 2 patrons who unsubscribed from Patreon because they were, we don't like that. I'm like, okay, but that's understandable.
Right.
I expected that. But then I had 8 new patrons because of that video. I was like, really? Do you know? And I was really surprised. And that was a really well-performing video. And I probably should say that I gave a lot of the income that came from the video to Ukrainian army.
Amazing.
To donated there. Yeah.
Amazing.
So that was brilliant. So that was, but I wouldn't consider it a collab. Thank you very much.
It was very entertaining. Jessica was actually here. Jessica
Cargill. You were right.
We were together doing our collaboration, so we just watched the whole thing unfold at the restaurant on my computer. And we're like, man, this is crazy.
No, this is great. No, I was really, I was harsh. I mean, in terms of, but. Yeah, I didn't speak, by the way, against her or against her family. No. It was only about the topic, that bothered me. Right. It's like, she has a wonderful family, whatever. I don't care. What she said was wrong. So I kind of addressed that, and some people didn't understand that, which is fine. I did a collab with Jessica, but it was so tiny. It was such a tiny collab. Okay. I have Jessica in one of my videos about snorkeling in Jamaica.
Okay.
And Jessica has me in one of her videos in cave exploration and the Potassi estate. So it was like kind of but it was like such a tiny collab. I should have really interviewed Jessica, but then you wouldn't have had this opportunity. So, hey.
Things work out for a reason.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're talking about Jessica Cargill. She's another Jamaican YouTuber. We've done collabs. Great channel. You should go follow her as well.
Yes, please. And give a link in the thing, you know, like somewhere up here, so people can click and watch the interview with Jessica. It's actually one of the popular videos on your channel for a good reason, because Jessica is an incredible person. You know, you can listen to her because she's got so much she brings to the table as well. And
speaking of other YouTubers, Jamaican YouTubers, what other Jamaican YouTubers do you follow?
I love Rocheline.
Me too.
I love Rocheline. She's amazing. I'm so sad she's now not in Jamaica.
I
she went to the US.
That. Yeah, I just found out.
I was like, no, please come back.
Yep.
Do you know? And I wanted to film her. I actually had planned, like, I was in Kingston and I was going to meet up with her and do the filming. But by the evening, but before that, I was also interviewing Jamaican students who were in Ukraine.
Oh, yes.
So I had lots of interviews planned, right? And in the evening, I had to meet up with Rocheline and I just do the interview with her. And then by the time I got there, all my battery's dead. I'm actually absolutely exhausted after long rides all over the place and then everything. And I was like, let's do it on a different weekend. And she said, sure, you know. So I did a video with her on a live stream on her channel. And then the idea was to have her in my videos, top 10 Jamaican YouTubers. So I wanted to push that video, right?
Awesome, yeah.
And I wanted to have her in there. I actually filmed Alex from the Elite Jamaica. Do you know the YouTuber Alex from Elite Jamaica? It's called. He's an amazing guy. Actually, he's an amazing guy. He's a really nice YouTuber. He's got over 100,000 subscribers now, but he's walked his way through, and he's just using his phone. I
don't know about him.
No, I don't think you might even know him, because you see his videos. They don't get recommended as much unless you're searching for a specific topic. I'm going to send a link to him.
What kind of content does he make?
Oh, about Jamaica, like all sorts of things, research. Like he goes like through, like some of his latest videos, he just goes to some of the ruins, like the places, like old plantations and things. But he often goes into some rural Jamaica and he films different, you know.
Awesome.
But his channel also has kind of information about Jamaica, like about Jamaican flag, about the just different. He just talks about Jamaica.
Awesome.
Some of his popular videos are about the richest Jamaicans, or something like this.
Okay.
But he's a very nice person.
Awesome.
He's like really nice person. I was like, so I like him. Spearfish in Jamaica. I love Spearfish in Jamaica. Yes. So with Rocheline, it's a shame we never got the chance to film her. I really hope she's going to come back to Jamaica at least for some time and we can meet up.
Yeah.
Because I really like her work. She's putting the work into it, you know.
Yeah, good. No, I think it's important to big up these channels.
Absolutely.
I mean, for me, I don't know Alex, but Rocheline, I used to watch her Jamaica stuff. Jessica Cargill, of course.
Oh yeah. I mean, I didn't mention Jessica simply because we're
right. I understand, of course. I actually like Life with the Stevens. I like their channel. I do like them. And so your whole collaboration really just added. So I watched them.
No, their channel is perfectly fine. I don't mind their channel. They're fine, you know, and they're whatever. It's the comment, as I said.
Yeah. Spearfish in Jamaica. I like them as well. Do you watch Soa Stuck on an Island?
Yes, they're pretty cool. Yeah.
I like his as well.
I don't watch them, but I do listen to them, right? Sometimes when they do the trips. Yeah. Someone else I watch. Who else?
Romain Virgo. I started watching his because he just started. You know the singer Romain Virgo. But he started like a family channel, and then I watched the Powells as well.
Oh right, wait. There is a family that I watched at some point. I actually really like them. Life with, but not the Stevens, the other guys. There was another family I was watching. Oh gosh, that's embarrassing. I forgot now. No, because you see, I don't have the time to watch the videos. Right. You see, my biggest problem, right, is that I don't really watch YouTube. I simply have no real time to do that, right? So I listen when I drive.
Okay.
So this is the kind of So your 4K videos and
It doesn't even matter.
I don't even look at you.
Well, I have a podcast version of it,
Right,
so
so
you can actually just go to Apple
that's what I
Podcast
do.
or Spotify.
I don't have Apple.
Okay, Spotify, you can do
Right.
that. Yeah.
No, I just listen. I just listen to, to things when I'm driving. And I drive a lot because I have to go to different places and things. And it's like my favorite is a drive to Kingston from Antigua Bay. So it's a 3 hour. I can listen to things. It's really nice. Or I'm learning foreign languages. So this is like something I do when I drive.
Awesome.
So this is but I don't watch
Fair enough.
that much,
Yeah.
you see. So that's the problem.
Okay. I think that's a good note to end this on. Bigging up other Jamaican YouTubers.
Absolutely. I want them
Yes.
to make the video top 10 Jamaican YouTubers to push and promote the content that is made by Jamaicans here in Jamaica. And I think, or by non-Jamaicans, but here in Jamaica. So just to show more Jamaican content to the people and for people to choose more channels to watch.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for doing this. I think this was amazing. We definitely broke the record for longest podcast on my channel, and I'm glad I did it with you.
I don't know, man. Maybe you need to cut a little bit. I don't know. How you're going to edit
great.
this.
This was fantastic.
But I hope that people find something useful from this conversation. And so I hope,
they absolutely will. And of course, if you have not subscribed to Jamaica with Irie, you got to go do it right now. So much great, amazing content, really going in depth on so many different aspects of Jamaica life, Jamaican culture, and you definitely won't regret it.